So now we're going to be focusing on the post-conference for Ms. Catherine Lopez Ramos, and I want to thank you for allowing me to come into your classroom today and observe your lesson with your students. And the observation that I focused on today was the reviewing of the slopes with the y-intercept and the x-intercept, and focusing on the free throws and the field goals lesson. Now, first off, let's start with how you felt the lesson went.
Well, I definitely didn't plan for. Sorry. Okay. I definitely didn't plan for it to take so long, but when things like this come up, when your kids aren't getting it, you kind of have to adjust. So I did. It took a little bit longer to kind of go over that problem with them because I was part of their homework. But I mean, it's a concept that we're gonna keep bringing back anyway. So I figured, it's really that important for me to stop and making sure that these kids get it. And we're gonna keep spiraling it, but I think it went well overall. But it did kind of shock me a little bit, like, oh no, they need more practice, and I get it. It's just adjusting, being flexible, that whole flexibility. So just had to adjust, that's all.
Definitely. It's really good to note out being flexible, engaging out the students' comprehension here and there on that lesson. Also, you wanted me to focus on checking for understanding and the introduction of the lesson, which was, I viewed a small glimpse of it. How did you think that went?
The checking for understanding part? I definitely try to focus on it just because I know from last time, I'm like, I'd check a little bit more. So I made sure that when I was calling on students that, like as you said earlier, trying to have students check that we all heard what was happening. So I just kind of gauged from calling different students that, if they were understanding or not. And I was trying to make sure that I covered the whole room, that I wasn't sticking to certain people. So I think as far as checking for understanding, I think it went well. But I definitely feel like it could probably done more.
And I agree with you in that aspect. The behaviors that I really want to focus and reinforce on were the students that you were asking questions. Like you said, it was throughout the classroom. It was like one side of the classroom, and then you selected another student from the classroom, and it was just going back and forth, and even throughout. So that was something that I really want to comment on, because there was approximately like 20 out of 36 student responses to the questions that you were saying based on the homework review. The students were also actively engaged towards the objective, mainly so when you were focusing on the sentence framing, and I really want to reinforce that and praise that, because you then had asked Antonio to restate his comment or his statement, and you gave him the sentence frame, and that really helped out Roxanne to restate hers, even though she had a little bit of difficulty. And then in the end, you had commented back, and you asked Destiny, so can you repeat what Roxanne had said? So with all of that, it's just keeping the kids accountable of their own learning, making sure they're listening and being engaged. That component of that lesson was really powerful. For most of the students, especially Antonio, Roxanne, and Destiny. Continuing with that, because I know that you merged in the math language, and then you wanted them to be like creating their own sentences in a sense. So which students do you think were actively engaged in the lesson?
Well, for sure, like, I feel like most of them were, because as soon as I started calling on students, they're like, oh, like, she might call on me. So I feel like for the most part, most of the class was. I do have a couple students that I know are high, so when they think they know everything, and like, I do tend to call on them once in a while just to like check to make sure they're there. I think it's two. One of them you can see more in particular, but I have two students that I know are high, and I do notice that sometimes they'll like kind of like wander off. They're not focusing, because I know they get it, and I'm going slower for the other kids too. So I think that's my only concern is the
So in what
students.
ways are you assessing their learning for those students that are like gifted and talented? How are you assessing their learning?
Well, for them, I do tend to call on them. Like, you mean as I go in the lesson, or just in general? Okay.
For this particular lesson, like, how did you know that the young girl in the back got it, and that she understood it?
Well, usually when she gets something, she kind of just like tunes out, and I can tell when she tunes out. But I try to always bring her back in by like telling her, hey, sit up, look over here, or calling on her. So I make sure that I incorporate her into the discussion so that she has something to say. If she, it's one of those, like, if you really know what's going on, then you can tell me right now exactly. And usually every time I call on her, she's dead on. Like, she's dead on every time. So I have no problem with her. The other student, he's usually engaged. So I don't call him as much as the other girl. But I do call on him, and same thing. They're always dead on, those two. And so then once I understand, like, I see that they're both there, then I try to call on the other students.
Because when you call on the students, and it was really evident with Antonio, and he had stated it, and he, even though with a small scaffolding of the sentence frame, he got it. And just even with the young girl that she knows it, or the other student that knows it, just keeping like a foundation of like, hey, they understood it, now can you repeat their idea, or do you agree with what they said? And that goes into some recommendations and refinements of your skills, because you got it. And maybe when you had Ismael and Carlos were able to break down the steps on finding the y-axis and the x-axis, possibly having that discussion within the other students, like, hey, was Ismael correct in this part, or do you agree or disagree with Carlos, or why? Did you do it a different step, or was it the same? Having that dialogue, I think it would be more meaningful, not just for the GATE student, but the other students who are having that trouble understanding the language. What kinds of things could you use to enhance the classroom learning based on those students' responses from Ismael or Carlos?
Wait, what do you mean, what could I do? So,
what other ideas could possibly arise from that discussion between the student, like explaining it step by step?
So you mean as far as like what else I could do to kind of like facilitate, or what else I could do to like engage the other students?
To enhance the learning of the classroom.
To enhance learning, okay. Well, something I've done before, which I didn't do today, but something that I could do is I have students come up and actually like do it on the packet. So they're actually writing and explaining as they're writing what they're doing. So I've done that before, where I'm like, no, you want to come up, your turn to be the teacher, so definitely done that before. And mostly when we have like exam reviews and stuff, I tend to do that a lot more, just because at that point they should already be able to do this independently.
So. Especially your GATE or gifted students, they're able to do it. They're not able to just show it, maybe write down in step 1, I did this and this and this.
Exactly.
Because they're already gifted in a sense where they can expand their thoughts already.
Exactly. So that's something that I've definitely done before, that I tend to do a little bit later once we're getting close more to exam time. And I also do a lot of whiteboard tutorials and they pretty much take over, because at that point they're independent, and those gifted students have the opportunity to be the teacher. So
that's pretty amazing to hear. I like those responses. Another thing that was a possibility of suggestion, possibly writing down the sentence frame on the whiteboard, especially for that one student, Roxanne, which she seems to be like an English learner.
Yeah.
And when she responded back to you, she responded in Spanish. So I'm not sure if it's a language component, or if it's the math component that she's not understanding. So we want to kind of gauge that out and see what's going on. So maybe like a suggestion
for sure
for those students who are English learners.
Yeah.
To support them.
Yeah, no, that's something that I thought about today as I was helping out Antonia. Actually, was like, man, like I need to have like a sentence frames wall. Because I do have some stuff on the wall, but I could probably move that so where students can all see it. I did think about that today, like, I need some sentence frames up. In my second period in particular, we do have bilingual classes that are offered here, so I never assume that they're English learners, just because I'm like, okay, like, I don't want to like single them out or anything like that. But then once I start getting to know them and start gauging where they're at, like Roxana today, I was like, oh, okay, I really, really need to do this. But even then, I feel even if they're not English learners, it's beneficial to all students anyway. So it's one of those, like, you think about it, oh, well, it's going to help everybody anyway, so might as well just do it.
Exactly. Good point. But I completely agree with you in that aspect. So for now, as a closure, if you could do the lesson over again, what would you change about the lesson?
What would I change? Well, like you said, like definitely having those sentence frames up so that they, because I feel like there's certain frames that I could use for every single X and Y intercept problem, that they would go along with every single one. So definitely having those sentence frames up. I like the actually now that I talked about it, I really like the idea of having the students come up and do it on the board, or like doing it on the paper and with the projector. I think that would have been really cool to see, because like this stuff was just review. So for them to review, it's like you should know this by now kind of thing. So having them go up and do it would have probably been a little bit more beneficial, especially because the students listen to the other students. They tend to be more interested when other students are talking. And it's kind of funny, they kind of giggle about it, but they do listen.
Yes.
And yeah, I think that's what I would do, just to kind of engage the students, like pull in the students a little bit more.
And with that, just engaging, just checking for understanding.
Exactly.
It's not just engaging.
Right.
It's kind of aligned in a sense, but you definitely make some good reflective thoughts.
Yeah.
And that's really great. Anything else you want to add?
No, just thank you for the feedback. I mean, honestly, like it helps, and every single lesson is improved, and so it helps me to see like what I can work on still, So I do think the feedback a lot.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Excellent. I'm here to refine your skills and enhance them.
Trying to.
So overall, the students seemed engaged based on the various questions that you asked throughout the lesson. Instead of giving the students the answer, you allowed them like, well, why is that? Or why is it why? Or, keep on posing those questions, because you want them to be accountable and you want them to become more of that critical thinker aspect. And just to reiterate the introduction of the lesson, you allowed the students to explain on the continuous and discrete information, was really powerful for them, and just kept on seeing the repetition of it to ensure that they identified the X and the Y axis. So overall, really great.
Thanks.
And yeah, it was really a great pleasure to see your lesson, the growth that you've done thus far.
Thanks.
So, really nice.
I'm trying, man.